And look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
Hello and welcome viewers, I'm Pia and you're watching the China Report on NewsX World, and here are the top headlines. According to reports, China's securities watchdog chief Wu Qing has requested approval to step down, citing health reasons. Wu, who took over as chairman of the China Securities Regulatory Commission in February 2024, was brought in to stabilize the country's stock markets. Chinese President Xi Jinping welcomed Thailand's monarch, King Maha Vajiralongkorn, marking the first visit by a Thai king to China in 50 years. Now, this historic visit comes as Beijing aims to strengthen its image as a benevolent neighbor and a reliable economic partner. South Korean President Lee Jae-myung has announced that South Korea and the United States have finalized a joint fact sheet on trade and security agreements. Lee has revealed that South Korea will build nuclear-powered submarines and form new partnerships with the US in shipbuilding, AI, and the nuclear sector. The US has approved a potential $330 million sale of fighter jet spare parts to Taiwan, marking the first such transaction since President Trump took office. The Pentagon has stated that the sale aims to boost Taiwan's defense capabilities. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has announced Operation Southern Spear, a Southcom-led mission targeting narco-terrorists across the Western Hemisphere. The operation aims to curb drug flows and bolster homeland security across the 31 countries under U.S. Southern Command's purview. A Ukrainian drone attack damaged a ship, apartments and an oil depot in Russia's Novorossiysk port, injuring 3 crew members. Regional officials have meanwhile informed that a fire was contained and no apartment residents were hurt. UNRWA Chief Philippe Lazzarini has warned that the agency faces a $200 million shortfall that could cripple services for millions of Palestinian refugees. He has urged states to pair mandate renewal with real funding after major donors cut support. US and Argentina have unveiled a trade network framework opening markets across 11 sectors, with Argentina making most concessions. Argentina will also grant wider access to US goods, ease non-tariff barriers, strengthen labor and IP enforcement, and curb distortive state actions. Well, viewers, those are the headlines and our top focus. China's securities regulatory chief, Wu Qing, has reportedly sought approval to step down, citing health reasons, just 1 year into his role as chairman of the China Securities Regulatory Commission. Wu's exit would be an unexpected move, as he was appointed in February 2024 to stabilize China's stock markets. Now, under his leadership, the Shanghai Composite Index has risen by about 45%, outperforming global market indices. Known as the broker butcher for his crackdown on securities firms, Wu's tenure followed the abrupt removal of his predecessor, Yi Huimin, amid market turmoil. His departure could shake investor confidence and potentially disrupt recent capital market reforms as well. The market observers are closely watching for a possible replacement and the impact on China's ongoing market recovery. No official comment has been made by the CSRC or the State Council on this particular matter. Of course, the larger question is how might this impact market reforms that are currently underway? Meanwhile, we're shifting focus to more developments coming in. We're now learning that China has summoned Japan's ambassador after sharp comments from Japan's new Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi about possible military support for Taiwan. Takeichi told the Japanese parliament that an armed attack on Taiwan could justify Japan sending troops under its right to collective self-defense. Beijing has called the remarks erroneous and has warned that any interference in what it calls its unification cause would be met with a hard response. Japan, however, says that Takeichi's comments are consistent with its security law passed in 2015. Tensions have risen further when China's Consul General in Osaka posted a now deleted thread widely seen as aimed at Takeichi. Japan's foreign minister called the comment highly inappropriate and has urged China to keep the broader relationship on track. With us on the broadcast is Dr. Asta Chadda from Ritsumeikan University. She's an associate professor of international relations, joining us from Kyoto. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX World today. We've of course been seeing this back and forth going on, but what's really shocked observers is the rhetoric, the sort of language that was used by the Chinese Consul General to Osaka. We've seen the Chinese Foreign Ministry try to distance itself, but in the meantime, it's no doubt that it is a representative of the Chinese government that has made these comments. How do you think it augurs for China in the long run? Ma'am, over to you.
Yeah. Are you asking me? Sorry.
Dr. Chadda, you can go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Hi, Pia. Thanks for that question. Well, I mean, I think a few days ago we were discussing on your channel, why Prime Minister Takaichi made those comments in the first place. And I remember saying that, she equated Taiwan security to a situation threatening the survival of Japan. And I mean, we know now that there are geographic reasons to it. I mean, Taiwan is very, very close to the last Japanese uninhabited islands. And also the fact that Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi mentioned that she could warrant sending Japanese troops to support the island under the right to collective self-defense. And this is the other, major point here, because Japan has been consistently trying to, in one way or another, reinterpret Article 9 and the extent to which the self-defense forces could be used as an armed force, because that's really, I mean, armed force is not something that Japan is very comfortable with historically. Now, China's reaction comes, very much expected, because they're being serious about it. They don't like the fact that, these remarks were made at the highest, space in the political space in Japan. Specifically, they said that these are erroneous comments, and what that means is that they want Japan to retract these comments. But anyone who's been following for at least the past few decades how Japan-Taiwan relations have developed would be able to see that there are a lot of geostrategic and geoeconomic reasons underlying why Japan is doing what it is doing, right? So despite the implications for East China Sea security, despite the implications for probably worsening or some sort of obstacle to Japan-China relations, the Japanese Prime Minister made these comments knowing very well that they still think of Taiwan as a very crucial part, of East China Sea security. Its proximity to Japan is very important. I mean, the westernmost inhabited island of Japan, Yonaguni, is is about 110 kilometers away. So any Chinese action would be seen or would be interpreted by Japan as an attack on its sovereignty or a possibility of that, and hence them trying to put their self-defense forces, rather than just defending the area surrounding Japan, to extending their reach and saying we will invoke collective self-defense and send our forces. I think it's a huge jump from Japan's traditional position.
Indeed, and we've also recently seen numerous incursions into the median line by PLA aircrafts, by PLA Navy vessels as well. On the other side, we are seeing that since day one, Takeichi, who's known as a China hawk, has called for transparency, and she's not someone to really mince her words. So what do you make of China's reaction? Is it an attempt then to now take control of the narrative that Takeichi seems to now be steering?
I mean, you very rightly said that. I mean, for China to demand Japan to take back its words, and especially the words of the Japanese Prime Minister, is in a way them showing that the relations have already in some way strained. They don't, I mean, Japan-China relations, at least at this point, the economic relationship would continue, I suppose. But, there is a deepening of this rift and mutual distrust between the two nations. But also, what we need to understand is that both China and Japan at this point, they are very aware that this is not just a question of Taiwan, right? This is also a question of Senkaku Islands, because irrespective of how relatively less is the Chinese PLA presence around the Senkaku Islands, we do know that there are incursions from time to time. So Japan trying to put its foot down and show some strong response to what it sees as China's increasing militarization around Taiwan and in the East China Sea, this is very likely to cause further rift. And I mean, I do not see any possibility of Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi now rolling back her words. So I think at some level they are preparing in some way to both manage a deteriorating bilateral relationship if it were to go worse, but also at the same time show that Japan is now back on the scene and even militarily wants to contribute in some way to East China Sea security.
All right, ma'am, requesting you to stay on with us as we're tracking some other significant developments. We're now learning that the United States has approved the sale of fighter jet spare parts and repair kits to Taiwan, totaling $330 million. This marks the first potential arms transaction since US President Donald Trump took office. The Pentagon has stated that the deal will help Taiwan maintain operational readiness of its fleet, which includes F-16 fighter jets and C-130 transport aircrafts. Taiwan, which is self-governed, strongly rejects Beijing's claims of sovereignty over the island. China, meanwhile, considers Taiwan as a breakaway province and has warned of possible military action to assert its control. The Pentagon, meanwhile, says this sale will help Taiwan defend itself against future threats. The transaction is part of ongoing US support for Taiwan amidst growing tensions with China. Still with us on the broadcast is Dr. Asta Chata. Lately, we've seen the US administration in a way not exactly distance itself, but also not openly engaging with the Taiwanese. There were reports coming in earlier that a Taiwanese delegation was not allowed to even use US airspace while heading to Latin America. What do you now make of this defense deal that has come in? Of course, upgradation of F-16s and C-130 aircraft is what is in focus. And how does this figure in US's larger Indo-Pacific strategy?
Thank you, Pia, again for having me to discuss this pertinent issue. I mean, you're right when you said that at some point in the past we did see a slowdown, at least or some sort of a backtracking of United States to not bring the Taiwan issue to the front. Specifically, we saw that in President Trump and Premier Xi's meeting that happened on the sidelines, right? I mean, this, at least US approval of sales should be seen more like a legal obligation in that way, because, US has been trying to make these defense services in some way available to Taiwan because they want Taiwan to maintain self-defense capability. That's what they say. And in US's own words, it's to help Taiwan meet current and future threats by maintaining some sort of operational readiness. So given that they have approved the sale of, spare parts for the F-16 fighter jets that already Taiwan maintains, this should be seen more of as a continuity of that relationship. Now, that being said, it does also in some way ease the sort of tension that was getting generated at some point, seeing that President Trump did not want to bring the Taiwan issue to the fore when discussing things with China. But looks like the Taiwan issue, at least in some measures when it comes to defense, articles sale or defense services sale, I think it's kind of back on the table. And the United States must be expecting some strong response from China once again, because it once again shows how US is very heavily invested in East China Sea security, and the fact that they have agreed to make these sales or resume these sales at some level or continue them, does show that Taiwan remains important to United States, not just in its wider Indo-Pacific security vision and strategy, because Taiwan is at the core of that as well, but also the fact that the US is looking actively to protect the global supply chains, particularly in the semiconductor industry.
Okay, ma'am, with that, I'd like to thank you for taking our time and, of course, explaining this context and your perspective to our viewers. We're tracking further updates. We're now learning that China has called on the Netherlands to withdraw its measures related to the ongoing dispute over chipmaker Nexperia. In a statement released on the 13th of November, Chinese Commerce Minister Wang Wentao has urged the Dutch government to take concrete actions to resolve the issue. Minister Wang has made these remarks during a meeting with his Spanish counterpart in Beijing, emphasizing that China expects the Netherlands to translate its verbal commitments into tangible steps. Wang has also reiterated China's intention to maintain communication with Dutch authorities in a rational, professional and responsible manner as the situation continues to progress. With us on the broadcast is Mr. Andrew K.P. Leung, a strategist focusing on China's policy as well as its economy. We've recently seen China take steps to ease its own curbs on chips manufactured by Nexperia, which was seen as a move to at least revitalize manufacturing as far as electric vehicles is concerned. Do you think Netherlands will now live up to its verbal commitments and withdraw its own measures that it had made imposed back in 2021 under pressure from the United States?
Well, let's not mix the control of rare earths and other elements as it applies to Nexperia, whose headquarters based in the Netherlands, with China's control of the critical rare earths across the globe, targeted as a response or countermeasure against President Trump's tariffs. The two are quite separate. In the case of the Netherlands, this company, Nexperia, was established or has been established in the Netherlands and by the China's parent company based in China to manufacture legacy chips. Legacy chips means not the high-end chips, but very popular lower-end, largely the chips largely used by most products around the world, across the globe, including those in European companies and European production processes. So this supply of the legacy chips is from this Dutch company based in the Netherlands, but it's under the governance, the control of the parent company in China. Above all its chips are supplied by the parent company. Now, what has happened is that the Dutch government somehow seized control of this Dutch-based company by trumping up all sorts of charges against its chief executive. On the ground of corruption and all sorts of things, but invoking a age-long Dutch law to seize control of the company. That, of course, angered Beijing. Obviously, Beijing sees this as a kind of unilateral action, probably allied with American interests to contain China. And so that's China's hit back since then by seizing the control of these chips from the parent company, and that obviously caused no end problems because they don't. Although they produce the chips, but many of the components come from Beijing, come from China. So I think the Dutch company is now finding it as in a contrary and is trying to seek some sort of accommodation, and is now sending its representatives to talk to China on the ground. But I think that they know where the dynamics are without the supply of these key elements to this Dutch company, which is now seized by the Dutch government. There's no way that they can carry on the production. And as I said, they're supplying a lot of legacy chips around Europe. But this is quite different from the stranglehold on the critical rare earth elements that go into products in throughout the United States, including F-35 fighter jets, because that is seen by China as a very effective countermeasure against Americans' tariffs. So the two are quite separate. On the American side, Beijing still maintains this regime of control, even though now paused for 1 year as a result of the deal in Busan between President Xi and President Trump. But since before then, China has already doubled down on the global control system of these rare earths by requiring the granting of permits those buyers are, because the fear is that some of the European buyers could later on supply these chips back to the United States. That this global control is not targeted to the world. It's basically strengthening China's countermeasure against Trump's tariffs war. But this is quite different from the Nexperia company, now seized unilaterally by the Dutch government, and that company supplies only legacy chips. So both sides are now trying to seek an accommodation on this Nexperia company as a result of this latest visit of Dutch officials to China.
Indeed, and I also want to understand what are the interests of other countries in the European Union. We do know that China is the largest EV manufacturer in the world, but there are automobile industry is also rather strong in Germany as well. So in light of this context, could we see pressure being mounted from Netherlands, fellow EU countries, in order to expedite it to withdraw its measures on Nexperia?
I think that there's some interaction between the Nexperia case and the China's global control of the rare earth system as that apply to the European Union. Because on the Nexperia side, as I explained, there is a question of legacy chips. The chips, these are by no means the high-end chips, but they are absolutely necessary for the production of a lot of products in European production facilities. And then, of course, the seizure of Nexperia caused a lot of problem in the supply value chain. So there's one dimension. On the other dimension, as China's doubled down on the global control of critical rare earths as a countermeasure against Trump's tariffs, this global control system requiring the granting of permits also affects or slow down the supply of the essential rare earths to a lot of European companies. Not least, of course, the Europeans, since the past couple of years, has been distancing itself from China, which is, of course, seen also as a threat, and also some of the European nations are American allies in a global kind of confrontation with a rising China. So I think that there are different dynamics involved, but because of President Trump's indiscriminate tariffs war affecting even its European traditional allies, so the Europeans are also seeking to recalibrate the relationship with China. So with all these different dynamics involved, and that's why the European nations are trying to work out a way to seek a better accommodation without embracing China, without terribly offending the United States. Is trying to find a way which suit the interests of European manufacturers and producers.
Indeed, sir. With that, I'd like to thank you for taking out time and, of course, explaining all of that to our viewers. On that note, we're shifting focus to more developments coming in. Now, according to the National Bureau of Statistics, China's economic data shows steady improvement in several sectors. As China's consumption structure enters a key upgrading stage, strong demand continues in culture, tourism, medical and health sectors. Youth employment is also rising as college graduations end, while employment of migrant workers remains stable. Adding on, October catering revenue growth has accelerated and trade-in schemes are helping boost sales of consumer goods. Meanwhile, market supply and demand show positive changes, supporting firm performance and laying a foundation for achieving the full year growth target. Rising services and industrial product prices have returned to CPI to growth, while authorities continue to nurture new productivity. Whereas short-term challenges persist as new growth drivers replace old ones, but trade will be stabilized and support extended to firms under pressure. Private investment vitality is being encouraged, with manufacturing in emerging sectors increasing and the investment structure improving as well. Adding on, the National Day and Mid-Autumn Festival holidays also contributed to stronger services sector growth, highlighting China's ongoing economic stabilization. With that, it's a wrap on the China Report. We'll be back after a quick short break.
India.